Hey, it's Akia Garnett, and welcome to this week's edition of the Akia Garnett Show. I'm so excited to be with you. It's Tuesday, and Tuesdays with Akia Garnett is all about helping you and small business and entrepreneurship maintain the foothold that you need in your competitive space. This week is no different. I'm going to be joined by an amazing expert. She's just brilliant. She's very fun to be around and just has a lot of great insight to share when it comes to leadership and change management and all the things that matter to us when we're at the forefront of our careers and the forefront of our business and our brand. Her name is Julie Jacopik, and she's the CEO for iLead Strategies. And she's going to be spending time with me on the Akia Garnett Show. She's also going to be with me on Kick Fanny's Big Thinking, so you can hop on that at 6 p.m. You can go to kickfanny.com and listen direct there. And then she's going to join us tonight for My Brand Chat and iBrand Chat. iBrand Chat stands for International Brand Chat. So you can check out all of the shows that we've got going on today. We definitely want to see you involved in all of the conversations because they all are tackling this whole concept of leadership, change, and, by the way, a new study that's coming out for change management, and Julie's going to spend some time talking with us about that. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce to some and reacquaint with others, none other than Julie Jacopik. How are you, Julie?
I'm great, Akia. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Welcome to the Akia Garnett Show.
It's good to talk to you. It's good to think about how brand and leadership and change all intersect.
Oh, absolutely. Hey, Julie, by the way, how'd you get started in leadership anyway?
In some ways, I'm not sure of the answer to that. I think I started working in my family's business when I was a kid, when I was about 13, 14 years old, which meant I had a leg up on my colleagues. And so it was really not about my brilliance, but it was actually just about a lot of time and role. Ended up as a manager for Estee Lauder while I was in college. And sort of once you get those roles and you learn to do them reasonably well, there's a path that happens after that. So I think I got interested in leadership from that perspective, but I also had to learn some different tricks. When I worked for Lauder, I was at Bloomingdale's, and I was a good 15 to 20 years younger than all the people I worked with. And so I wasn't particularly intimidating, right? That kind of management style wasn't going to work. And I had to figure out how to lead my peers and do that in a way that was kind of different from what we got taught in school. And so over time, that became a way of leading and teaching others to lead and developing teams.
Wow. That sounds very fascinating, and I'm sure it was a lot of fun being at some of the brands or supporting some of the brands that you did.
Some of it was a lot of fun, and some of it, quite honestly, was a pain. Because I think the leadership model that I grew up with, and I still see, and that really is part of why I started iLead Strategies to begin with, has often been a command and control model.
Sure.
I told you what to do, you better do it. If you don't do it, I'm going to yell at you.
Yeah.
And it's been a model that was always about catching what went wrong. And at 5'2", you guys can't see me, but I'm not very tall, and 20 years old, there's no way that I'm going to look up at a 6-foot-tall, 6-year-old woman and yell at her.
Yeah.
Wasn't going to happen. So I had to figure out something else.
Yeah, I mean...
And I have to tell you that at 20, some of those days were kind of painful. It wasn't fun when that person yelled back at me, and I was held accountable for her. I had to find another way, and I think that so yes, it was great. There was a lot of working for those brands. That was really fun. But change for me is just like change for anybody else, and it's sometimes difficult. Pain tends to move us forward.
That's great. Without leadership, there's no such thing as sustainable brand success. That's the topic of today's show. I'm joined with Julie Jacopik. She is the CEO for iLead Strategies, and that's what we're talking about today. So, Julie, when I think of sustainable brand success, I think of companies and brands that have been able to maintain their competitive edge and maintain relevance in the target audiences that they serve. Now, in the beginning of launching a brand, it can be all about the idea, the greatness of that idea, the innovation associated with that idea. But the longer that brand stays around, the more people begin to look at who's driving the force. They become more interested in what's behind it. And that's where leadership's role becomes very critical. It's easy to get a great idea off the ground. It's more difficult to maintain relevance over an extended period of time. What are your thoughts on leadership and how things have changed over the past, I'd say, a few decades, especially considering all of the access we have to the various leaders who are out there who may not have been on our radars before social media became what it is?
I think there's a set of things that are at issue. One is we live in a 24-hour news cycle where whatever happens is known almost instantly.
Mm-hmm.
The cool thing that you and I are doing today is reaching way more people than a radio show would have been able to reach even in the 80s. So we have much more frequent communication. And really it becomes thinking about what's the next thing a customer needs. So it's great to have a cool idea about a product, but the nature of change and the nature of the business world today actually is having a really clear understanding of our customers. Mm-hmm. Because the products will change. I think about IBM, and IBM used to make typewriters.
Yep.
Right? Nobody uses a typewriter anymore.
International business machines.
Yes. Right? You had to figure out how what was IBM going to be if it wasn't little metal letters pounding on pieces of paper.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And they were really clear that it was actually about sharing information. There's a whole host of ways that we actually have to be really focused on what our task really is. And then I think as leaders, we actually have to be both visionary about the what we're really trying to achieve and inspiring to help people make those shifts to get there. Because not only did IBM have to learn how to make a different kind of machine, the role of the people making those machines changed, right? You're no longer casting metal, but writing code. So thinking about how you help people move forward in change, how you hire for a changing environment, how you support people given that change is happening becomes really important. And the pace of change has also changed. I said something about the news cycle changing. All kinds of things are creating change a whole lot faster than it used to be. It used to be, as a change manager, I would come into an organization and they would be starting change A. And change A would have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then there'd be a recovery period before change B started. Well, now change B started in the middle of change A. Mm-hmm. So change A also has to adapt. Mm-hmm. Right? We're requiring a higher level of adaptability of the people around us, both the people we work with and, frankly, our consumers.
Yep.
Another easy place to look at is you used to always go to a store to buy things. Now you might go to a store to buy it the first time, whether that's a particular company's shoes or cosmetics or equipment, because you want to play with it. But once you know that's what you like, mm-hmm. what are the odds of you going back into the store to play mm-hmm. versus buying it online? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the way we do things is changing faster and faster and faster.
Yeah.
And it requires that leaders be really clear about the point. The point wasn't typewriters. The point was information. So how do we help leaders get clear about that? And how do we help them sustain that vision over time and not get caught in the idea of the production of the typewriter, right?
Precisely. And even though brands change and brands evolve, and the whole concept of what a leader is evolves, what I believe is a constant and what won't go away is the need for leadership. Again, people look to who or where something is coming from. They want to attach themselves or their thoughts to what's generating the movement or what's generating a movement. And I think that, Julie, it makes sense to talk about what the essentials of leadership are and have been. I mean, what do you think are the foundational principles of leadership? And I'm not going to qualify that with saying good leadership or bad leadership, because I know there are lots of lists out there on what's a good leader versus what's a bad leader. But when you think about the principles of leadership, what would you say are those core things that are attached to a leader?
I think I mentioned one earlier, and that's the idea of clarity of vision.
Mm-hmm.
A client of mine used to say, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not clear about where you're going, you may end up somewhere you had no plan of being. So the clarity is really important. I would say my second favorite leadership trait is curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Is being curious about the impact of change, curious about the people around you, curious about what your customers need and want, curious about how you can do things in a different way, open to the idea that there's more than one way to get from point A to point B, so that you're constantly considering what else could be happening and how things could be different.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know, I think the third one for me is really respecting people. Mm-hmm. Whether that's your customers or the people you surround yourself with. I think that in the end, for most of the people that are listening and for most of us, our most expensive investment is in the people that work with us. And so respecting them is about making good choices about who you give what task to, and building relationships where you actually can trust people to do their best and recognize it when you see it. I think the pace of change stresses people out. And I think when people get stressed out, they get very busy looking at what's wrong. And this isn't perfect. And yet, I have yet to see a study that says yelling at people works. In the end, you want to have the right people doing the right things and support them in doing their best. So maybe what are we at? 3 things? I think a fourth thing for me is also creating the space for people to innovate, which is a very fancy way of saying creating the space for people to try stuff that might not work.
Yeah.
If people believe they have to be perfect all the time, they will never try anything that hasn't already worked. Mm-hmm. And if it hasn't already worked, it ain't new, and it's not responding to the new needs that are in the world.
Wow, that's a really great point. And so when you're going back to one of the points that you made, and I think it was an earlier point regarding, I think it was point number 2, regarding inquisitiveness or curiosity, as business owners and visionaries who tend to wrap ourselves around our ideas and romanticize about how the world could be different and better, faster, how our universe could be a lot more efficient if only this could take place or that could take place. What can you say regarding the leader of a brand who really does want to take those risks, but not, throw the baby out in the bathwater in the process? I mean, it's kind of associated with your last point regarding giving people or giving your employees the space to create change without, fear, or giving them room to be creative. What can you do, or what can you say to the actual leader who also wants to make sure that they've got the room to create and then use their platform and their employees or their constituents to support that without it moving in a direction that would essentially ruin the brand or really deteriorate the efforts that have been put in place?
I think it probably goes back to the clarity first. And it's not just your clarity of vision, but it's also communicating that clarity. Part A and Part B is taking measured risks. I think when we use the word risk, we envision people jumping off cliffs. Mm-hmm. But that's a pretty extreme form of risk. Mm-hmm. I think if you're clear with people about what they can spend, so whether it's they can spend 10% of their time, and so one day every 2 weeks they play. If it's how much of some necessary resource that they have flexibility with. I think it's about setting expectations that people will try things. I think it's about being clear that the way we respond to not succeeding is to learn from that and use it to succeed in the future. There's a common phrase in the IT world, fail forward fast. And that's actually what we want to do. Mm-hmm. We want to try something. If it works, great, keep doing it. If it doesn't, stop quickly, move on, learn from it, and do something else.
You know, and when people tend to think of change in the organizational structure, especially when you say try new things and giving people the room to create and innovate, if you look up the organizational, if you will, chart, and you go down to the front line, or people who may be in customer service, or people who are really connected at the community for those brands, how can you create or add value to that experience so that it's not just the change that's taking place in the C-suite that people are watching and appreciating and applauding, but it's also the change that could be taking place, you know, on the front line?
If all the change happens in the C-suite, none of the change ever actually happens. You know, at the end of the day, it actually takes leading from every level, and it actually takes the engagement of every level in the process. You and I were talking before the call a little bit about the law of inertia, and you know that objects at rest will stay at rest, and objects in motion will keep moving in the same direction unless there's an outside force. Often it's the C-suite that's the driver, but then things actually have to move, and you have to have clear expectations. You have to have incentives for people to move forward. In general, while I think you asked about the risk piece, for most people, without some reason to move forward, without some reason to innovate, the inertia will get you, and people won't actually take risks. Mm-hmm. So you actually have to give them the chance to do it, and you have to actually listen to people. And while a lot of what I teach and say, I have been known to say, boils down to being kind, it's not because being kind is nice, although that's a nice benefit. It's because it actually is what works. If the C-suite drives stuff and never explains it and never embeds it in the culture, it isn't going to actually happen. And if the C-suite orders people with no incentive and no understanding and no responsibility and no commitment to do stuff, mm-hmm. they don't stay at your company very long, and your change walks out the door with them. So the idea of engaging all levels of the organization in change, being clear about where you want people to go, what outcomes you want to see achieved, and leaving some flexibility in the how they do it is actually how you embed change that sticks.
Yeah, and you know, that all aligns very well with branding and brand success. When you've got a healthy culture on the inside of an organization, it just seeps through to the outside of that organization. And so when you think of brand success, you know, there are several ways that you can measure or monitor brand success. I mean, clearly one of the first ways is, you know, are we generating revenue? Are we meeting and exceeding budget? Are we working within our mission? Are we creating positive impacts within our mission? Are we moving closer toward our vision? Are our shareholders happy with us, and are they happy with the returns that they're receiving? Those are some of the basics in terms of measuring brand success. But when it comes to measuring brand success at a very far-scaled approach, and when it certainly comes into play with sustainability, leadership sets the pace in every single way. Think about brands like Apple, and think about the leadership that Steve Jobs put in place before he passed, his own philosophies on leadership and the impact that he created. Still today, many people see Apple as synonymous with Jobs. And while they've got a new CEO at the helm and they're doing some great things in terms of rolling out new products and services and reinventing in many ways the way that people see Apple, so that it can maintain sustainable brand success, the leadership platform was rolled out, and building upon that is, what people would expect to see. They wouldn't want to see a complete departure from what's already been put in place. So what would you say, Julie, regarding brand success, some of the basics that I've already mentioned, and then how leadership and those who are CEOs and presidents of their own firms can begin to lay some of that foundational philosophy for their brand, so that whoever is running or flying at the helm in 10, 15 years with their brand has a great place to start from?
I have about 17 answers. I'm just trying to pick one because there's a lot of places to weigh in. But I think a lot still boils down to clarity of vision. And let me say what I mean by that. So it's not that it's clarity of vision in terms of Apple building easy-to-use computers for the masses that are good to look at. But it's Steve Jobs recognizing that there was a legacy to leave.
Yep.
Building something that fostered the legacy he cared about. So I just did something really little with my Mac. I downloaded Yosemite, which is their new operating system. Steve Jobs was all about design, and it was all about ease. The whole key to the Yosemite thing, aside from the fact that it's just nicer to look at, is it actually enables all of my devices to work together even when I'm not using them. So if I go to my iPad and I look at something I was working on my laptop, I pick it up where I left it off. Mm-hmm. I don't have to figure out how to go somewhere to do that. The whole key is that one of the values was also ease of use, and it's clearly persisted beyond him. You can tell I actually like my Mac. But there's also really good things to understand about IBM. IBM was about speed. It was about durability. It was about quality. And those things have continued long since their original CEO has died. And so part of it is clear vision for the immediate thing and clear vision for the legacy. Mm-hmm. That's one way to think about this. Another way to think about it is building resilience into your team and into your culture. I'm sort of over the word sustainable because it feels stodgy and stuck.
Sure.
To me, and it, you build something so it can withstand things. But if you look at design that can withstand things, it's actually not the hardest and firmest. It's actually the flexible. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What they build into buildings in earthquake zones is actually flexibility to be able to withstand the movement of the earth underneath it. And I think building organizations that have enough flexibility is what is really called for. And I think there's a few pieces of that. One of them is that nobody is the only person who knows something. Right? More than one person knows how to do things. Mm-hmm. Some of it is about creating the space for that curiosity. In the end, new business development is either about taking a solution you've created to new audiences or figuring out what an existing audience needs that you haven't built yet. Where do you create the space to think about where those folks are going? Because we are in a world that, and this actually relates to the study we'll be talking about later, that is much more volatile, much more uncertain, much more complicated, and much more ambiguous. So it requires that leaders acknowledge that and build for that.
Yeah. And, back then, when I say back then, I mean, 30, 40, 50 years ago, when MBA programs were really starting to take shape, the emphasis of it at that time was to help train professionals, your attorneys, your doctors, your accountants, people who didn't have a business degree, to help train them so that they can lead, so that they understand a little bit about everything regarding business, so that they knew how to hire the right people who would lead in various areas or priority areas for a business. Today, the MBA concept and program has taken on, its own form and discipline. Very similar to what you're talking about with, back then buildings were built so that they were beautiful to look at. They were tall, they were strong, they were sturdy. And now, they've taken on their own, concept in terms of being able to withstand environmental forces. And that whole thing and concept, to me, is leadership. Being able to withstand environmental forces, being able to still carry a torch, and for that torch to be seen regardless of what's happening around a particular, era or a particular challenge. I mean, if you pick any news headline right now, and the company that is focused on a priority area in that particular industry, you will see that leadership sometimes fades to the back when things become very difficult, and all of a sudden leadership will resurface. There are several companies that have gotten it right over the years when it comes to how to lead and stay and maintain relevance during challenging times, but there are others who really are not prepared for the earthquake when it actually hits. I want to leave people with some tips for leadership, especially in small business, and how to, number one, survive through a challenge, or survive through industry change, small or large, and also not only how to survive, but to thrive so that their brand maintains relevance long after a particular change has swept through a marketplace. So what can you say to the business owner who's listening and saying, okay, now I understand all this. I understand how important it is to have, my feet under me when it comes to leadership and making sure that people understand the legacy that I want to lead. What would you say is a place for them to start?
Understand that you are not good at everything.
Mm-hmm.
Get help where you need it. And so some of that, I think leadership requires a certain level of introspection and knowing yourself. Know what it is you're good at, and then find ways to get help with the other stuff so you can spend your time doing what you're best at. Your company doesn't exist if you don't, so you have to actually take care of yourself. You don't actually get to work 24/7, even if you want to, because your sustainability requires that you get rest, right? So it's taking care of yourself. It's getting help on the things that are not your strengths. I do some work around the neuropsychology of success, and everybody has something they love that comes easy, and then there are things that are a little harder, and then there's some area that is 100 times more difficult. That's the thing you give away first. For me, that's certain detail work. I can't be visionary and dot all the I's and cross all the T's. I need help with that. So getting help, taking care of yourself, getting help, I think are like the first two keys. The third is diversification of your market. Where are your different customers? Who else needs what you do? I live outside the Washington, D.C. area, as I suspect some of your listeners do as well. And we've got another federal budget year where sequestration or the stopping of government has is a potential threat for a lot of us. Not just for the people that directly work for government or directly contract with government, but if the people who work for government and contract with government lose jobs or aren't paid for a period of time, it's also the restaurants they would have eaten dinner at.
Yep.
Right? So who else and what else can you do to accommodate those things? Mm-hmm. It's foresight. It's being, and I actually think that's about being playful. We haven't talked about this, but if we sit there and think every budget is cast in stone and every idea and every product is also cast in stone, the minute we think of it, we end up making very narrow decisions. Mm-hmm. I think leaders need to play with ideas. Mm-hmm. Now, that doesn't mean you go out and you buy the machine that creates the thing you're thinking about, but play with the idea of a new thing and who might want it. What would they be willing to pay for it? How much fun would you have creating and producing it?
Yeah, that's
as
nice.
A place to start. So I think, just to keep reviewing, take care of yourself, get help, be playful about who else needs what, find a diverse market.
Yeah.
Those are the biggies for me.
Yeah. And what do you think about actually making sure that, because some industries or some professions actually have continuing education units where you've got to stay on the cutting edge. You've got to know what's coming down the pike when it comes to your actual profession. But then you've got, some that are less regulated or not regulated at all. And your wills could be kind of just stuck because you're operating from old data, or you're operating from old practices or antiquated methodologies. What do you think about that? Because part of leadership is knowing more, not knowing more per se, but just knowing, just having your finger on the pulse of what you're actually practicing really is, and being that go-to resource or that think tank that may not have all the answers but certainly knows how to help people get to them.
Oh, wow. 3 things in there for me. One, absolutely continue to grow your own professional development, and those of us who don't work for other people to pay for it have an obligation to stay current. Secondly, very much related to that, we need peers. If those of us who came out of organizations, we had colleagues to talk to. Mm-hmm. We need colleagues to talk to bounce ideas from. We actually need to create that social space. And I'm losing the third one. Hang on just a second.
Well, that's kind of goes to your point, losing the third one. That goes to your point when you've got, the smart people surrounding you, they will come in and help you articulate the third one. So why don't we make it that, making sure that you're not the only think tank on your actual platform, that you've got other people, as Julie said earlier, who know what you know, right? So you're not the only person.
People who know what you know, and some people that you can test ideas with, keep learning, and make that part of what you do as a regular practice.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So it's kind of applauding those who go that extra mile to learn something new and then present it to everybody else.
Those of us who are entrepreneurs can learn from other professions. Mm-hmm. I love, one of my sort of standing questions for myself about certain actions is, what would a surgeon do? Both because a surgeon would never start helping a client over dinner. Which I have a tendency to do. But also because you wouldn't want to go to a surgeon that wasn't up to date.
Well, no. And when you're, just think of your business, or think of people who are patronizing your business. They're thinking of you as a surgeon to help them with their problem, and they want to know that you're operating under the most recently published and practiced intelligence regarding what it is that you do. And so I really appreciate all of your fun answers and just the dialogue, Julie. It's a great way to kick off our Tuesday branding. Talking about leadership, maintaining relevance, maintaining a sustainable brand over years and years to come. Think about Campbell's soup. They're still on the shelves. I was, had a little trickle in my throat. It certainly wasn't Ebola, just FYI. And I needed soup. I wanted soup. I wasn't sick or anything, but I felt a trickle and I wanted soup. And I wanted Campbell's soup. There's a brand that has maintained relevance for me over the years. There's Healthy Choice, there's Progresso, there's a whole bunch of stuff out there on the market when it comes to soup, but I wanted Campbell's. And I think part of that was just wanting to feel comfortable. The winter's coming, it's getting colder, we've got the whole polar vortex thing threatening the Washington, D.C. area, and I wanted to feel comfortable, so I wanted Campbell's. Good. There's a brand that maintained relevance in my mind over the years, and I went to the store and there it was. It was still there, waiting for me to come and buy it, and that's kind of what we were talking about today. Thank you so much, Julie, for the time that you've given us on the Akia Garnett Show. Be sure to tune into Kick Fanny's Big Thinking this evening at 6 p.m. We are going to be talking about a new survey that is coming out by iLead Strategies, which is Julie's company, and kickfanny.com. You will want to know more about this. It has a lot to do with the new stressors of leadership and how we are managing through that. And then Julie's going to be back on with me at 8 p.m. tonight for My Brand Chat, and we're talking about brand inertia and leaders that resist change. So right now we just talked about leaders who can embrace change and what you can do, but there are still some of us who like to stay and do exactly what we've always done because it's worked. And we're going to talk about how that can be the biggest threat to your business. And so we thank you so much again, Julie. Please do us a favor and give us your URL and any other information you'd like to leave our audience with.
Sure. My company is iLead Strategies. It's iLeadStrategies.com. And check me out there, and we'll be talking again later.
Awesome. Thank you so much. There you have it, folks. Join us later for all the other things that we've got going on for Tuesday Branding. See you then, and remember to think big.
If you want to go far, she'll take you from where you are. She's here to motivate, here to recreate. The Akia Garnett Show. Inspiration, motivation. The Akia Garnett Show. Recreation, reformation. The Akia Garnett Show. Dedication, expectation. The Akia Garnett Show.